When one thinks of Russia, their mind usually pulls up one image. And that's precisely where my journey began. Red Square is one of the oldest public squares in Moscow, with its roots and iconic red walls tracing back to at least Ivan the Terrible in 1495. More than just a scenic spot, you'll likely end up spending several days here just exploring everything that it has to offer. And from a bird's eye view, pound for pound, Red Square is probably the most dense with historical sites of any square that I've seen so far anywhere in the world. Saint Basil's Cathedral, the Goom, Lenin's Mausoleum, the State Historical Museum, the Iberian Gate, the Kazan Cathedral, the Kremlin Wall necropolis, the Eternal Flame and Alexander Garden, the Diamond Fund, the Armory, the Tsar Cannon and Bell, Patriarch's Palace, Ivan the Terrible Bell Tower and its accompanying cathedrals, and even the State Kremlin Palace. But for the sake of this video, our starting point, which will likely be your starting point when you first get off the Moscow Metro, will be the Alexander Garden. It was first built after the Great Napoleonic Wars when a fire in 1812, and you'll learn throughout Moscow history pretty much everything new built was because of a fire, destroyed the previous infrastructure, opening up the possibility for Tsar Alexander I to build a garden over the former riverbed. And it's very pretty during the spring, but since it's winter, the biggest thing to try and catch is the changing of the guard at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. The tomb is a war monument to Russia's victory over World War II, as well as honoring the memory of all Russian soldiers who died without being recovered after war. And it's not hyperbole. Millions of soldiers were pronounced missing or dead during the Great Patriotic Wars, as they call World War II. So this flame and its representative guard is keeping their memory alive. This honor guard actually has an additional history as well. This is the same regiment that also guarded Lenin's body at his mausoleum, which we'll encounter a little later, until the fall of the Soviet Union removed the eternal watch over him. After that, we pass through the gates into the courtyard of Red Square. You'll pass by the Iberian Gate, which was destroyed by Stalin to make room for war machines to parade, but was rebuilt with its accompanying chapel in 1994. They call this gate and chapel the Iberian Gate because it has a replica of a miracle icon from the Iberian Peninsula inside. It's a tiny little chapel, but if you peek inside, if you're patient enough to not just run past it to the next site, it's really worth it. Then on your right, you'll see another cathedral rebuilt after its destruction by Stalin, the Kazan Cathedral. You can't film inside, I asked, but when I went there, I was there during a Christmas Eve service at night as well as during the day here, and I promise it's super impressive. You should go check it out. Now, I was super fortunate. I was traveling during New Year's Eve and Orthodox Christmas, and they have this giant Christmas market that makes everything around you feel super duper magical. You can ride rides, you can meet the Russian version of Santa Claus, Ded Moroz, or you can just grab a raff and some roasted chestnuts, warm up, and watch everyone having the time of their lives. Now, not to kill the Christmas vibe, but it's not all magic spirits of the woods here in Red Square. Sometimes there's mummies. The Lenin Mausoleum was finished in 1930 after the death of the founder of the Soviet Union in 1924. And again, I wasn't allowed to film in here either, although there are millions of photos online you can see. But I went, and for me, at least, it was pretty surreal to see. I'm not really sure how I feel about it even recording this now. This is This is a weird one. Across the square, you'll encounter Saint Basil's Cathedral, which is probably the single most iconic piece of Russian architecture in the entire country. This cathedral, which has its roots back again to Ivan the Terrible, was also on the chopping block of Stalin to tear down. That's right, this was getting ready to be torn down for more war parades. But thanks to some very clever historians and architects, they were able somehow to prolong the plans to destroy it long enough for World War II to hit. And when World War II hit, all the plans for construction stopped and all the efforts were diverted back to the war effort. After the war was over, Stalin passed away pretty much, and this place survived. Talk about divine providence. Now, if you're someone looking at this from the outside, each spire, each tower that you see is actually a different cathedral inside. So it's not a single church, it's a bunch of churches. But back to the cathedral, the saint, the namesake of this cathedral, Saint Basil, was a holy fool, which is a sort of ascetic in Russian Orthodoxy. They wore chains and lived an extremely religious, ascetic lifestyle in order to seek closeness with God by rejecting the physical world. And you can imagine someone wearing nothing but chains and oftentimes nude in the snow in Russia. Literally, you would look pretty foolish for the Lord. And in fact, the first room you actually enter in St. Basil's Cathedral has St. Basil's remains inside of it. There's a reliquary, it's very ornately decorated, and inside are the actual remains of the saint. And the saint has a really cool story. It was said that he actually corrected Ivan the Terrible during a church service when Ivan was talking. And Ivan, instead of, doing the thing that most czars did, which is beheadings in the square, actually saw the holiness of this man, respected what he said, and when St. Basil died, he actually named this cathedral after him. Looking at every square inch of this place, it's a theology lesson of Russian Orthodoxy. You cannot escape the theological lessons in every window, on every wall, in every icon, much of this, if not almost all of it, original to the original building. When you walk in, it feels like you are wrapped in history. Some days they even invite Russian Orthodox singers to come and chant traditional hymns of the ancient church here in Old Church Slavonic for tips. And it really makes this museum come alive, like you're teleported to the time of Ivan the Terrible, hearing what they heard and seeing, quite literally, what they saw. Leaving there, you'll wrap back around and encounter the Goom, a mall on a whole different level of malls that you've ever seen before. Built to its current standards by Catherine the Great in the early 1800s, this is essentially a czarist shopping fever dream in its heyday. In 1917, however, the Soviet Revolution nationalized its nearly 1,200 stores. In fact, the Soviets tried to use the Red Square Goom as proof of their Soviet method of retail in malls. So they replicated this all over the country, but it inevitably failed and turned into office space during the reign of Stalin. Weirdly enough, it even held the body of his departed wife, who committed suicide. She was kept at the very center of the Goom for the ceremonial viewing of the corpse before her burial. During the various shortages of the Soviet Union, it was said that the lines for basic products in the Goom reached all the way to St. Basil's, which this video does no justice to it, but if you've been here, you know how truly long that line has to have been. It's like waiting in line on several runways at a large airport. It is pretty stinking long. Nowadays, the Goom's been re-privatized and is open to dozens of luxury brands from all over the world. And if you go here, be sure to try the special ice cream that they have inside. But don't forget to come back at night and you'll see a completely different Red Square. For us, we got dressed up and purchased tickets to see the Nutcracker at the State Kremlin Palace on my birthday, which happens to be Orthodox Christmas. My patron saint happens to be Santa, good old Saint Nicholas. Originally a meeting place for the Communist Party, it was commissioned to be built by Khrushchev in 1961. Inside the State Kremlin Palace, you'll see Soviet architecture essentially untouched since that time. It even has mosaics of all the former Soviet republics laid across the inner facade. Inside, it's massive, and it's well worth your time to try and catch a ballet here. It's so 1960s and 70s with its wood paneling. And the price was only about 2,000 ruble for pretty good floor seats. So I highly recommend you try and do this if you're traveling here. Especially since Russia is famous for its superior ballet dancers. They're known far and wide across the world of ballet. And if you're here at Christmas time like I was, they perform Tchaikovsky's version of the Nutcracker. Now, if you've never felt magic on a stage before, this is one of the best chances to experience it for the first or even the 100th time. Afterwards, we decided to take a walk through the magic of the Kremlin lights and even stop in for a very Soviet birthday treat. We went to, and I'm going to mess up this name, Varenichная? I probably didn't pronounce that right, but hopefully you can find this place. It's a themed restaurant, essentially what the typical Soviet babushka's house looked like. The wallpaper, the furniture, the decorations, and everything.
So it's just a normal public house. Residential house.
Остыли реки и земля остыла, но я замерзнуть не боюсь. Это в городе мне грустно было.
And I even got a Soviet birthday cake. This is a slice of Medovik, which is like a Russian honey cake, and it's super good. Our second day begun with our excursion inside of the Kremlin walls. You can actually get into Red Square normally without any sort of tickets, but if you want to get into the Kremlin walls, you can see a bunch of things that are not open to the public. You can see the Assumption Cathedral, the Bell Tower, and even the Tsar Cannon and Bell, which are two of the largest of their kind in the entire world, the largest cannon and the largest bell. And the funny thing I realized about filming these and seeing pictures of these is their scale is hard to film. In 3 words, they're freaking big.
how thick this is.
The churches inside this secure area date back to Ivan the Terrible, so think the 1400s, and is one of Russia's greatest rulers alongside Peter and the Rurik dynasties and the Romanovs. It's a part of the historic tapestry that is Russia. The churches are all museums now, but my personal favorites are the Annunciation Cathedral. It was built in 1489 and was designed to be the personal chapel of the royal family of Russia.
Jedin subot, car i Gospod, praznikov praznik, i tožestvo jest tožestav, Bože blagoslovim Hrista vo vjeki. Angel vopijaše blagodatnji, Čistая Djevo, radujся, i paki reku, radujся. Tvoj sin voskrese 3 dneve od groba, i mrtvija
And my personal draw to this place is the real icons by the world-famous medieval icon painter Andrei Rublev. Now, maybe you've heard that name by the renowned Soviet director Andrei Tarkovsky. He made a remarkable movie about this monk that has inspired countless famous directors across the globe. You can watch it for free on YouTube, by the way, so when you're done here, check out my St. Petersburg video first, and then go watch that movie.
Ти же чистая, красуйся, Богородице, ovo stani roždestva Tvojego.
My next favorite site is the Cathedral of the Archangel, which is covered in the tombs of Russia's boyars and knazzes and even the infamous baddie himself, Ivan the Terrible. That's right. He's here. He rests just behind the iconostasis, the golden screen that's always in front of Orthodox churches. I mean, you can get within a meter of this massive historical figure that touched millions upon millions of lives in this country. It is a fantastically eerie feeling. I think that's one of the cool things about Russia is that everything you touch is draped in the very good, the very bad, and you can touch it, which is a very overwhelming feeling. Once you leave there, you'll continue down a very good overlook of downtown Moscow, if I do say so myself, to the Armory and Diamond Vault. Both museums are seriously worth your time, even though I couldn't film in the Diamond Vault and neither will you, but it has the real crown jewels of Russia inside, so do not skip either of these. But the Armory, which even I was able to film inside of, is big and impressive. All the crowns and gowns of Russia's emperors and tsars from ages past are sprawled out for you to admire here. The wealth of Imperial Russia is certainly on full display. The wall necropolis is next on the list, and it's also pretty intimidating. You start with a monument to the bodies of 200 fighters in the 1970 revolution that are buried in a mass grave pretty much under your feet, the youngest of whom was 13 years old. Furthermore, many of the most famous artists, poets, thinkers that contributed to Russia's Soviet culture are cremated and interred inside the Kremlin wall. This includes Maxim Gorky, Peter Kropotkin, and even an American, William Haywood. I know, that surprised me too. Then you'll move a little down and see some of the greatest leaders of the Soviet Union who are buried here with small monuments. This includes Brezhnev and, of course, the most controversial, the Joseph Stalin. Now, to cleanse the palate of all of this death, you might decide to finally go see the next most iconic building of Red Square, the State Historical Museum. This giant red brick monstrosity was built in 1883 and is one of the largest and most respected history museums in all of Russia. You can spend hours and hours here seeing everything from prehistoric Russian history, the Slavic tribes, the Scythians, all the way up to modern Russian civilization. It's all contained here. Every step that comprises the tapestry of this country is cataloged in painstaking detail.
Пьяные веселые сидят и потешаются, с молодыми женами забавляются. С молодыми женами забавляются, тут один и та Добрыня невесел сидит. Один-то Добрыня невесел сидит, и невеселого Добрынюшка не радость. Ох, не веселого Добрынюшка не радость, он и говорит, а он своей да молодой жене. Говорит он своей да молодой жене, свет по имени Настасья Микулишна.
From the roots of Slavic and Viking pagans, to the Asians of the Far East, the Tartarians, the Caucasus, even the history of Orthodox Christianity. This museum has informed me more than just about anything of all the different components that make up the modern state of Russia.
Через 3 года не будешь дико 6 годков, а из-за 6 годков не будешь дико 9 лет. А за 6 годков не будешь дико 9 лет, а за 9 лет не будешь ди 12 лет. А за 9 лет не будешь ди 12 лет, и за 12 и не будет, куда хошь пойди. За 12 не будет, куда хошь пойди, да куда хошь, говорит, пойди, да хоть замуж уйди. За моего ли за недруга Алешеньку, да за Алешеньку, за Поповича. За Алешеньку, да за Поповича, проходила тут Добрынюшки 3 года. Проходила тут Добрынюшки 3 года, проходила-то ему.
You can finish your last Red Square day at the nearby underground mall if you'd like. You can grab some Adidas, eat some delicious Korean takeout, and try to take in everything that you've just seen and learned in just a couple of days. But the complexities of this Russian story doesn't end here. This is a single square, a single location in a giant metropolis that is Moscow. Now, I've spent several months here at this point. I have traveled all over Central Russia, and I still cannot compartmentalize all of the good, the bad, and the beautiful this country is made up of. It is, so far, one of my favorite countries that I've had the pleasure to visit. From tribal leaders, to czars, to emperors, to general secretaries, and finally to presidents. It's all just that. It's all Russia. Every last piece of it. And not many countries can claim such historic and cultural diversity. To stand in Red Square and to look around you with open and honest eyes is inherently to be incapable of explaining the various mixed feelings that you feel. But here I am in my studio at the end of my video, and what can I say for all of this? What lesson can I leave with you, the viewer? Well, I spent hours turning back all the footage that I saw of myself, and what I consistently noticed was one thing in every single thing that I filmed. I was smiling. And I think that's enough for now.